Let's get the obvious thing out of the way first. Madara lost. He was betrayed by Black Zetsu, used as a vessel for Kaguya, ripped out of the story at the moment of his apparent triumph, and eventually died as an old man in the dirt, talking to Hashirama, having accomplished nothing. The infinite Tsukuyomi was undone. The world was saved. Naruto and Sasuke sealed Kaguya, and everything went back to something resembling normal. That's the ending the show gives you. But here's the question worth sitting with. What did Madara actually want? Not the method. Not the infinite Tsukuyomi specifically. Not the moon. Not the chakra fruit. Not any of the specific mechanics of the Eye of the Moon plan. Those were tools. What was the goal underneath all of it? Madara wanted to end the world as it existed. He wanted to destroy the system. The cycle of hatred, the wars between nations, the machinery of violence that had been grinding people into nothing since the beginning of shinobi history. He had watched it his entire life. He had built Konoha trying to stop it from within, and watched that dream collapse. He had seen the same conflict reproduce itself across generations with mathematical precision, different names, different faces, same result. Children turned into weapons. Alliances made and broken. Peace achieved and lost. Peace achieved and lost again. He concluded that the only way to stop the cycle was to end the conditions that produced it. Not reform. Not negotiation. Destruction of the foundation, replacement with something entirely different. Now look at what actually happened. By the end of the Fourth Shinobi World War, the 5 great nations had fought together for the first time in history against a single enemy. The entire framework of competing hidden villages, the structure that had defined shinobi civilization for generations, had been shaken to its core. Madara himself had, at the height of his power, effectively ended the war between nations by giving those nations a common enemy large enough to force unity. He didn't plan it that way, but that's what happened. And after the war, the world that came back was not the world that went in. The 5 Kage had stood on the same battlefield, fought under the same command structure, bled for the same objective. The hostility between villages didn't vanish, but the architecture of permanent rivalry had been permanently altered. The idea that nations could cooperate at that level had gone from theory to lived experience. That doesn't unhappen. Naruto becomes Hokage in a world where the Hokage is not just the leader of Konoha but effectively the most powerful political figure in the known world, with relationships built across every major power during the war. The structure of the shinobi world post-war is fundamentally different from what came before, more centralized, more connected, shaped by shared trauma rather than inherited competition. Madara wanted to erase borders. He wanted a world where the old divisions no longer determined how people lived and died. He didn't get the infinite Tsukuyomi, but the world that survived him looks, in its essential shape, much closer to what he was trying to build than to what existed before him. That's the surface version of the argument. But it gets deeper. Consider what Madara actually believed about human nature. His break with Hashirama wasn't just political, it was philosophical. Hashirama believed people could choose cooperation. That given the right conditions, the right leadership, the right institutions, human beings would eventually stop destroying each other. Madara believed the opposite. He believed the cycle was structural, not incidental. That the problem wasn't bad leaders or bad luck, but the fundamental nature of a world built on conflict, where power was the only real currency and peace was always temporary. The infinite Tsukuyomi was his answer to that problem. Put everyone in a dream. Remove the conditions of conflict entirely. Not reform human nature or bypass it. Build a world where the machinery of hatred simply has no fuel. He lost that plan. But here's what's strange. The world that emerged after the war adopted, in diluted form, the same underlying logic. The peace that follows the Fourth Shinobi World War is not the peace Hashirama imagined of people choosing cooperation because they understand each other. It's peace enforced by the existence of threats so catastrophic that conflict between nations becomes irrational. Naruto and Sasuke become, by the era of Boruto, essentially the 2 most powerful forces on Earth, operating as a kind of mutual deterrence. The hidden village system persists, but is underwritten by the implicit understanding that certain individuals now exist who could end any conventional military conflict unilaterally. That's not Hashirama's dream. That's something much closer to Madara's framework, a world where the old politics are obsolete not because people changed, but because the power differential made them irrelevant. Madara spent his life arguing that the shinobi system was broken beyond repair. that the hidden villages were engines of perpetual war dressed up as peacekeeping infrastructure, that as long as nations trained children into weapons and sold those weapons to the highest bidder, nothing would fundamentally change regardless of who was in charge. By Boruto, the hidden village system is visibly collapsing under exactly the pressures Madara identified. The 5 great nations are struggling with relevance in a world where individual power has outscaled institutional power. Konoha exists, but the forces that threaten it increasingly operate outside any framework the village was designed to handle. The entire architecture of the shinobi world, the one Madara tried to destroy, is dying on its own, exactly as he predicted it would. He didn't need the infinite Tsukuyomi. He just needed to be right. And there's something even more uncomfortable at the center of this argument. Madara's stated enemy was the cycle of hatred, the self-reproducing mechanism by which one generation's trauma becomes the next generation's violence. He understood, perhaps better than anyone in the series, how that mechanism worked because he had lived through it, contributed to it, and eventually been consumed by it himself. The irony is that his war accelerated exactly what he was trying to stop. The trauma of the Fourth Shinobi World War, the losses, the scale of what people survived, all of that got passed forward. The generation that came after, the Boruto generation, is living in the shadow of a war they didn't fight and can't fully understand. The village they grew up in is haunted by what their parents endured. The peace they inherited is fragile in ways they don't entirely see. The cycle didn't end. It mutated. It became something new, shaped by the specific violence Madara introduced into the world. He didn't stop the machine. He fed it and made it bigger, and then lost control of it. But here's the thing. He knew that would happen. Or at least, he knew it was possible. His plan was never to stop the cycle from within. It was to end the conditions that made the cycle possible, to reach outside the machine entirely and shut it down from a level the machine couldn't reach back from. He failed to do that. But in failing, he proved his own thesis. The world he left behind is more unstable, more dangerous, more structurally broken than the one he found. The old mechanisms of conflict that he said were irreparable have indeed proved irreparable, even after everything. He was right. He just wasn't right in time. What Madara wanted, at the deepest level, was to be the last war. To absorb all of it, all the hatred, all the conflict, all the cyclical violence of the entire shinobi era into one apocalyptic moment, and then replace it with something that couldn't reproduce itself. He wanted to be the full stop at the end of the sentence. He became, instead, a comma. A disruption large enough to change everything, but not large enough to end anything. And the world on the other side of that comma is not the world that existed before him. The nations are different. The power structures are different. The threats are different. The scale of what conflict means has been permanently redefined. A world where gods fight in the sky above hidden villages is not the same world where feudal lords hired shinobi clans to fight their border disputes. Madara ended that world. Not through the infinite Tsukuyomi, through the war itself, through the sheer scale of what he forced into existence. He wanted to destroy the old world and replace it with his dream. He destroyed the old world. He just didn't get to choose what came next. That's not victory, but it's not exactly defeat either. Madara Uchiha looked at shinobi civilization and said, "This cannot last. It will destroy itself. The only question is whether the destruction is controlled or chaotic." He tried to make it controlled. He failed. But the destruction happened anyway, exactly as he said it would. He just wasn't there to see it. Subscribe right now and join our Telegram community. Get the latest anime news, new theories, leaks, and the hottest discussions before anyone else. Link in the description.